Hello and welcome to True Audio Files, where today I'm going to be talking about the new box set from Van Halen. Basically it's the Van Hagar years with Sammy Hagar. Basically 4 albums plus a album of rarities that are not available on any of the albums. Basically have 3 of the 4 albums on earlier pressings. So I'm really only going to be able to do a shootout between those 3. And was very excited when I first heard about this for several reasons. The first of which being that they were going to be cut by Bernie Grundman, who does a great job cutting in my experience. And most of the time I'm very, very happy with them. And they also claimed they were going to be cut from the original analog master tapes, which, that could be good or bad. I mean, if you've got a great digital transfer, in my opinion, it's not going to be that big of a difference, personally, if any. But anyways, so that was that. And there were a couple of albums that I didn't have, or one album I didn't have yet, which was Balance, so on vinyl. So let's start off with the first album, which was basically 5150. This is the reissue from the box set here. They all look pretty. They're pretty accurate recreations of the originals, I should say. And I compared it to I don't know if it's a first pressing, but it's definitely an early original pressing from, I think it's 1986 when this came out. Interesting story on this album in general. It was actually one of the first CDs I ever bought when CDs first came out. I don't remember if it was within the first batch, but it was within, the first batch or so of CDs that I bought when I first got a CD player, and used to play it a lot. And I just destroyed that one because that CD, because back then they said, CDs are indestructible, and well, I found out that they're not indestructible. So anyways, getting back to vinyl, I never had it on vinyl up until probably 4 or 5 years ago when I got that copy that you saw there. And so I took a listen to all of these and basically give you a little bit of a background on how I typically do these shootouts. I listen to whatever's the newest release because it's usually when I do a sound shootout, it's usually on because there's a new reissue that's come out. So I usually listen to that first, to basically just listen to it all the way through. Also get a sense for what probably sounds the best in terms of doing a good sound quality shootout. And I take it from there. So in this case, I don't remember what song I did, to be quite frank with you, but I think I only did 1 or 2 songs, but I did go back and forth quite a bit. Main reason why I did is because there's not a gigantic difference between the two. There's some subtle differences. The big difference on 5150 that I found, well, the biggest difference, because there's no big differences, is there's definitely more treble in the reissue. And it sounded like the soundstage may have been a little bit wider, not much wider, but maybe a smidge wider. Soundstage depth seemed to be pretty similar. Overall, I'd say they sounded pretty similar overall. And like I said, there really wasn't a huge difference between them. One other spot where there wasn't a huge difference was the pressing noise and the quality of the pressing in general. I was excited to see that these were 180 gram, which is usually a good sign that they're going to be done well. But this was done by, I think, GZ Vinyl in the Czech Republic. And they're usually a crapshoot. Sometimes they make great pressings and sometimes they don't. In this particular case, I'll go album by album, but all of the albums, I will say, they weren't over the top noisy, but they definitely had quite a bit of noise. And one of the reasons why that's a big deal is also all of the newer ones I found actually were cut a little bit quieter than the original pressings. So you put the fact that it wasn't cut as loud with a noisy pressing, and it becomes a little bit distracting, but mainly only if there are quiet parts in songs, which there aren't too many of those in Van Halen albums, or during the quiet sections between songs. So anyway, so 5150, not a huge difference. If you like a little bit more treble, you're going to get that with the new one, and maybe a little bit wider soundstage from my experience. So that's 5150. Next up, we have OU812. So here is the reissue from the box set. Again, the records are all going to look pretty much identical. The only differences that are going to be big, and actually on this one they're not that big, is the labels, because the I don't know if you can see it, but the Warner Brothers logo is different now. So because they are not owned by the same people, they were sold, and they're not part of the same group that owns the movie company. So anyways, so that's the reissue. This is the original. Early, I bought this actually at the same time I got 5150 a few years ago, because again I had it on CD but not on vinyl. The one interesting thing to note that is a difference between this and the newer ones is the name, the title, and the title and the band name are embossed on this. You might be able to make that out from looking at this, but it's embossed, where the new one is not, sadly. Played these through, and again, and on this one, I, found kind of the same thing as the 5150. And that was, again, more treble, not cut quite as loud for the new one compared to the old one. Soundstage was probably pretty similar again, but maybe a smidge wider, but again, very, very, very similar. There was very little difference between them. One thing that I will also say in general that I should point out and make clear is I don't think in general Van Halen albums are, would be classified as an audiophile recording by any stretch. One of the things that drives me nuts about them is that they tend to be kind of light on bass. And as if you've watched any of my videos, you may know I'm kind of a bass guy. I really love the bass. Really adds a lot of great emotion to the recording, in my opinion, and helps the enjoyment for me. That's a personal thing, but it's one thing that I've really noticed, and it was most prevalent on like 1984, for example. That one had, no matter what you did, you could not add enough bass to the bass drum and the bass guitar on that one. These ones are a little bit better, but still the same way. So, all right, so that's OU812. Next up is for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. So for this one, I don't have the German pressing that I know a lot of people seem to have for this. I have the only US copy that ever came out, and that's a Columbia House version. So it is a Columbia House pressing, and still pretty rare, still pretty hard to come by. But I've got that, and this is the reissue. Again, they look pretty much identical. I think the original is a little bit more red in color, but beyond that, it isn't much of a difference. Sound quality wise, there was I played Pound Cake, and then I tried Right Now. I could tell you that just from my memory on this one, because I did the comparison so much on these, and I kind of came back with the same conclusions again. I actually, for the soundstage, I didn't notice any difference on this. Definitely less highs on the club pressing, the Columbia House pressing, and the bass was pretty similar. There may have been a smidge more on the Columbia House pressing, but not much. But soundstage sounded nearly identical. The one thing that really, I decided to try Right Now just because it was Pound Cake, is a great hard rockin' tune, lots of guitar, and the voice and all that. But then when you got Right Now, there was a lot of keyboard and piano, which I felt would help with, showing the range of the recordings and really see if there was a difference. Well, there was a huge difference. What I found was, though, it wasn't because of the record, the mastering itself. I believe it's because I have a bad record, and it's hard. I can't show. I would show you on camera, but it's very hard to see. So I don't think it's going to show up on camera. But there seemed to be like a lighter spot in the on the record, and in general, it was very interesting, and it showed up mostly on Right Now, but side two in general had some issues where the right channel seemed a little bit muffled, especially on like piano and keyboard, and a little bit distorted. It was very weird, and I thought, well, maybe it's just the way the masters are now. So I bought the high resolution digital versions of this box set, and I compared that to the new record, and it was definitely much better, and it sounded much closer to my Columbia House pressing from a standpoint of it kind of just had a weird sound, like I said, a muffled slash distorted sound coming out of the right channel for mainly the piano and maybe the some keyboard sounds and stuff like that. So I've actually asked for a replacement copy, and hopefully I will get that. But that was the unfortunate thing about this one. So not only were all of them noisy, but I had that one issue with for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. So really disappointed about that. Disappointed in general over the pressing quality. I really wish they were a quieter pressing, and again, it would have been significant for this one because they weren't cut as loud as the original ones were. But, and I listened to Balance as well. I think it sounded decent besides the surface noise on the pressing, and also listened to the Rarities album as well. And just as a kind of for those of you who don't know me as much, and you're watching this, I clean my records before I listen to them all the time. In this particular case, they all went through a long ultrasonic cleaning, and they looked clean. And I used a brush before one of those carbon fiber brushes before I actually dropped the needle. So they definitely was not a dirt issue for the surface noise. It's definitely something to, with the quality of the pressing, whether it's poor vinyl quality or the conditions at the pressing plant or whatever it was. They just unfortunately were pretty noisy. But overall, I mean, if you take the noise factor out of them, they sound very good. And I think that if you can get clean copies of all of them in your box set, I think you'll overall be very happy, and you won't have to pay outrageous amounts of money for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and for Balance. I actually had an opportunity to buy Balance probably about 3 or 4 months ago, back in June of this year, and I just was not going to spend more than $200 for it. And so, luckily they came out with the new reissue, so I didn't have to, and I'm happy that they did. Disappointed that they used a poor pressing plant. I wish they used like Optimal or Furnace or QRP or RTI or Palace. Any one of those would have been a significant upgrade, I think, and probably would have been better for these reissues. So anyway, that's my take. I'd love to hear what you say. Have you done any comparisons between like early pressings and these new reissues? Have you had any issues with your copies of any of the records in the box set? I know that I know a couple of people who have said that they have had some issues as well. That doesn't sound like it was quite at the level of what I had, but definitely issues that were not worth keeping it, so they were going to exchange them. So little disappointed in that, but overall, if you can get some clean copies of them, I think you'll be overall pretty happy with them, because I think they're as good as they have ever sounded on this reissue. So that is everything I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button. And if you want to see more of my videos, subscribe to my channel and hit that alert bell too, so you know when my new videos come out. So that's everything I have for this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you already have. And you have yourself a great rest of the day and a great rest of your week. Thanks a lot.